This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good afternoon. It is that Sunday afternoon once again when you are joined by Dr. Herine Menya, Africa's own education doctor and education evangelist, for the afternoon show. And
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
indeed, tune in, talk it out with Teacher Talk Radio. Today, Sunday the 1st. For our first afternoon show, we usually have this show every late night, but because of the summer holidays, shout out to all our teachers who are on the well-deserved break. We have moved this show to the afternoon until the summer break is over. So today we are here, and first and foremost, my apologies for us starting late. Something came up that made us not start off at the right time. But here we are. We hope to be able to get back or plow back the time that we've lost. Today is an interesting and special day because we'll be discussing a topic that perhaps is not discussed as commonly as possible. It's a little bit almost like going against the grain. We are coming in the backdrop of a very important conference, the Global Partnership for Education Conference that happened in the UK, led by the Prime Minister of UK and the President of Kenya, the Global Partnership for Education Conference, which raised $4 billion to be able to support education in low-income countries. The main idea is to enhance partnership, ensure there is enough funding so that education can be transformed in these countries. And today we are going to have some discussion linked to that. The $4 billion, what is it about? What are we going to spend it on? The portion that we'll be able to get as a continent, Africa. We know that in the conversation we had the tag raise your hand for education. And in today's show, we will actually be getting a little more specific, and we'll be saying, raise your hand for the Africa boy child. Now that may sound a little off the mark because in this campaign, there was a lot of conversation or amplification of the girl child. And I must confess, I am one of those people who is a champion for the girl child. I lead a teacher training program, and we always talk about gender responsive pedagogy. And within that, I am always looking at how do we get our girls to do better, especially in the sciences. I am a mother of 3 daughters, so I am a champion of the girl child. However, because I am in the midst of education, what I would like us to do today with this speaker and who will be joining us soon is to really ask ourselves whether in the process, whether we should bring to the fore a little more conversation about the boy child, especially Africa's boy child. What's going on with the Africa's boy child? If you look at the Global Partnership for Education campaign, the target was to raise $5 billion. And as I said, the main goal was to use that money to ensure there's transformation or continued transformation of education in some of these countries. And then in a way of outlining some of the activities, they were able to talk about what they want to achieve. And as I said, it's both girls and boys. They want to ensure over 175 million or enable 175 million girls and boys to learn. So that's really good. It's both girls and boys. However, what's not very clear is what is it about boys that we want to do? Because in that plan, it is very clear some of the things we want to do for the girls. We have said, or the Global Partnership for Education is saying they want to work with governments to ensure at least 46 more girls get to school, and especially save at least 2 million girls from early marriages. Really good, really noble goals out there, and we're rooting for that. But the question is, as we talk about enabling 175 million girls and boys to learn. The boys, what is it that we really want to do? What are the specific interventions that we should be looking at, especially as an African continent, towards the boy child? And anyway, we might also look into, is it just about access? Because when you listen to what I've talked about so far, a lot of it sounds like access. Of course, there's something about quality, because they talk about ensuring over 140 million have access to quality or trained teachers. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. And I'll soon be joined by our speaker. I know he has been waiting for me to go online, and I'm just going to alert him that we are on and he should join. Um, so um, so please, thank you very much for those who already joined. I can see Mal is already here with me. Thank you, Mal, for joining. I can see somebody else is already here with me. As I said, I want to send a special shout out to all those who all the teachers who are on holiday. Many countries, including the country where I am calling in from. Did I say where I'm calling in from? I am tuning in right from the heart of the city of the land of 1,000 hills, that is Rwanda in East Africa. So the teachers in Rwanda are also on holiday, and a number of teachers are from Africa still on holiday. But I know there are also countries that just started, went back to school just last week. I know Kenya opened school on Monday. And I know also in Rwanda, the teachers who are teaching primary school will be starting school tomorrow. So a shout out to all the teachers who are out on summer break, a shout out to those who are going back to school after a short holiday. So it's a mixed situation, but I believe more are going to be able to join us. And if one is not able to join, of course, there's always the opportunity to listen back. So I just want to perhaps ask those who are already online. I know there was a delay, so there's a little bit of a confusion there, but I just want to ask those who are already online. I know Mal is joining in from the UK. The other two, your names are a little complex. So if you could just go onto the chat and tell me where you're joining me from, where are you keeping me company from, where are you tuning in from? So please type in and tell me which city or which country you're joining me in from. I promise we're going to have an interesting conversation, because I think there's quite some interesting data and viewpoint around the issues around girls and boys. We must agree that education matters are gendered. The girls and the boys experience education in a different way. So I can see Felix is already online. Felix, because you are the key guest, could you kindly call in so I could actually admit you as a speaker? Thank you very much. I can see you're doing that. So thank you. So yes, Felix has already called in and will still be joining us in as a speaker. Very good. So we have our key speaker, Felix Malombe from Kenya. He's already online. And the other person, we are three of us now, three great listeners, and that's good. Please tell us where you're listening from, apart from Mal, who I know is listening in from the UK. But the other person, PBGA, please tell us where you are listening from. And thank you very much, Felix, for taking your time to be part of us today. And I'm going to ask Felix to introduce himself. Before he does, I just want to make a comment. Felix is part of a community of ed tech, I would say ed tech professionals in the continent of Africa. Some are actually not from the continent, in the community. And when I posted and said I wanted somebody to speak about the Africa boy child, his response was so prompt. It was within seconds. He said, I want to be a speaker. I want to join into the conversation. So Felix, perhaps please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then perhaps tell us just a little bit why seemingly this conversation is very close to your heart. Over to you, Felix.
Wow, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Herine, for providing this awesome platform that or in to have a discussion regarding this topic. Yes, like you said, my name is Felix Malombe. I'm an educator. I am a husband, a dad. I am also a community leader, especially around education. I have a special interest in matters to do with, when I talk about community, matters to do with the gender and Gender here would mean what we call the gender roles for both men and women. Specifically, I have a special intention to see to it that the society understands exactly what we need to do in our community to ensure that we have an empowered community, not specifically for boys or even for girls. But of course, the discussion, as you mentioned, has been the focus has been on girls. Now we want to see what is the place for boys also as well, so that we can see how we can work together and build a community that is going to, live and thrive together. So my name is Felix again. I am based in Nairobi, Kenya. I am the executive director of STEAM Labs Africa, an organization that seeks to support students, children, teachers in the way of bringing technology in the classroom, not just for the buzz around technology, but rather to really improve on the learning outcomes, whether it be for boys or for girls. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felix. Thank you. You put on so many hats right there. You are an educationist, you're an ed tech professional, you're a community leader, and you have actually articulated that in all that you do, you are very keen about issues related to gender. I know you have a daughter, but as you have said, your interest is for both girls and boys. And in your interventions, especially the EdTech interventions, your interest is not just about the buzz around EdTech interventions, but really to see how we can draw on EdTech interventions to improve the quality of learning for both our girls and boys. Thank you very much for that. I can see we've been joined by many more people. Those of us who have just joined, if possible, kindly through the chat, just let me know where you're listening, where you're tuning in from. So Felix is joining us from Kenya. Of course, I said I am right at the heart of the land of a thousand hills. I'm right in Kigali. And so the other people who are online, can you let me know where you are from? So we're going to push on with this conversation. Today we're saying, raise up your hand for Africa's boy child. And I just want to, first of all, perhaps put context here. As Felix has said, as we have this conversation, we are having this conversation in very good faith. First of all, we want to applaud all the efforts that have been there, especially to support the girl child, and that the efforts that will be put in place to support the girl child. We actually applaud organizations such as the Global Partnership for Education, talking about enabling learning for both girls and boys. And so as we start this conversation, we're starting this conversation with an appreciation that indeed there's a gender dimension to teaching and learning. In other words, both the girls and boys have very specific and unique experiences towards accessing schools and even engaging in learning. And in most cases, this is even different across different subjects. So that's something that we're alive to. And that's something that we will continue remaining live to. But the reason why we are having this conversation is just to really do a reality check. There's been conversation in the continent around the girl child. There's been so much effort around the girl child in the continent, and we must salute all those people who have put in sweat and blood in looking at the issues that are affecting the girl child in the continent. And I must say, looking at the data that is around, that actually there is actually some great fruit that we can be able to celebrate as a continent based on the effort that the people, many different institutions and organizations have put in the last decade around promoting education for the girl child in the continent. And so yeah, so that's the first thing I wanted just to underline, because that's also the spirit with which Felix is getting into this conversation. He says he's interested in issues of gender. He's interested in ensuring both girls and boys actually have access to education. So the question is, however, the thing here that we're talking about, the thing that we want to tease out of this conversation, and right from within the week, I've been engaging in some conversation with different different players, different stakeholders from different countries. I've had conversations with researchers and educationists from Kenya. I've had a little bit of conversation with people from different parts of East Africa, South Africa. And there's a feeling that perhaps it is time that we brought to the fore conversations about the boys in a more deliberate way. So if you look at what Global Partnership for Education has put across, while they talk somehow generally about 175 million girls and boys, they go ahead to try and really amplify the girl child issue. So talking about, getting 46 more million girls into school, but also towards the end, as one of the key outcomes, they're talking about saving at least 2 million girls from early marriages. So from where I sit, if I was to close my eyes and imagine, okay, whatever amount of the 4 billion that will get its way down to our continent, if I was to try and tick off what are some of the things that we might do or that might be done, or where that money might be spent, for the girls, I might say, I think at the end of the next 5 years, there will be less girls caught up in early marriages, and there will be more girls in school. But the question is, what should we be aiming to see for the boys? And what is the situation really with the girls and boys? Is it really still stuck at access, or should we now be talking about perhaps other things like quality, even for the girls and boys? Before I go into the statistics, I just want to remind all of us that, please, this is our conversation. Feel free to jump into the conversation, especially through the chat. I am going to be a little hesitant to get people online as speakers because the last few sessions we've had a little bit of echoes when we've got people online as speakers, especially if you didn't prepare to have your headphone on. Then if I allow you to be a speaker, then we get echoes, and that reduces the quality of our conversation. So if you have your headphone on, if you, of course, you are listening in and you have your headphone on and you can speak without any interference, please type and let me know. And then when you call, I'll admit you. But in the meantime, we should be able to have very close conversation using the chat. So, Felix, before I go into the data, let me just allow you to dig in a little deep. When you think about the boy child, Africa's boy child, and based on the activities that you're doing in the community, the activities that you're doing perhaps in EdTech, what would be your first reaction or conversation point on this issue around the Africa's boy child, raising your hand for Africa's boy child?
Thank you very much. I think I would like to start from the point of what is really happening in the classroom. And I would really dive into the way I see the dynamics in the classroom, whether it be in schools where children, it's a community of children who are in public schools, where you think the standards in terms of access to information and all that is concerned, or in big and international schools, or even private schools which are in between. One thing that you realize is that, and this is, I think there is some research even towards this, that whenever you're talking about whatever context, I don't know, you can refer to a specific subject, sciences and, languages, boys seem to be reluctant to take in even education, especially during and just before adolescence. Boys seem to be, pulling back. Not even like it started today, but even over time, I have seen that as a trend. As a teacher of more than 8 years, what I've seen in the classroom is that girls actually seem to be in the best place in terms of participation in classroom, completion of the work, and so forth. And that is something that teachers, the street bureaucrats, when it comes to the relearning, that is happening. If the girls and boys are given equal chance, equal opportunity, girls seem to thrive in this specific aspect. And that is a big thing that I've seen. If you look at statistics based on what has been that which has been happening in classes over time, and in the examinations within Kenya, Uganda, and other countries within Africa, our girls have done extremely well. I think boys seem to be distracted a lot by various things in terms of games, things to do with the societal pressure also, and so forth. And that happens at a time when we are saying boys and girls are equal but different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's like the time tables are turning. It's
Mm-hmm.
when we've been saying the pressure has been on the girls in terms of the societal pressures, to now a situation whereby boys seem to be reluctant. And recently I read somewhere that even if when you look at the children who are in crime, the boys are out there, trying to do things, messing up. When you talk about drugs, the boys are out there messing up. When you look at things to do with street children, the boys are out there. You walk around, yeah, you find a girl. And I really sympathize with that, because I know the place of a woman. If you find a girl who is actually in crime, you really are broken. Recently, we had a
Mm-hmm.
situation in Kenya. If you find a girl who is a street girl, it is really breaks your heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we have normalized, boys being out there, really being the ones that are out there in crime, in among the street children and so forth. So there is a conversation, and I like what you've started and what you are saying, that we need to again look at, is it quality education for every child? I agree. I'm actually SDGs ambassador, and the goal, gender equality, is very particular to me, especially having grown in a family where my mom was affected by gender-based violence, growing in a place where my mom passed on because of HIV/AIDS, which was brought to her, innocently. I know the
Mm-hmm.
place of the woman, but I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
should we again start thinking about the boy? Not
Mm-hmm.
in the way of attacking, the situation that is happening, not a way of fighting back, but just having a conversation of how
Mm-hmm.
can we build positive masculinities and positive femininities in our communities to build a well-balanced society.
Thank you, Felix. I mean, you brought out such many highlights, and I'm going to try and track back some of the things that you've talked about, because I think there are points that we need to always keep in mind. The first thing that you did was, I mean, you tried to bring out your reflection point from different kinds of schools. You talked about public schools, international schools, private schools, and I think why and later you talked about issues around maybe the rural child and all that. And I think that is really important, because whenever we talk about gender, we are always reminded not to look at gender in a very blanket format. That what happens with the boy child in the urban area might totally be different, and the same to the girl child in the rural area. What could be the situation in in a private school setup potentially might be different in a public school setup, but yet there are some very common threads. So in the context of gender, that's why we talk about the issues of intersectionality. We're talking about whether it's culture, in other words, context is really important, whether it's culture, whether it's poverty levels and all that. So that's really important when we're thinking about this. And I think what we're saying is that we must be careful not to blanketly talk about, the girls are like this or the boys are like this. For us to be able to address the gender issues related to the girl child and the boy child, we need to give ourselves to dig a little bit deeply into the different contexts. But then you go right into the classroom, and you're saying in your last 8 years of teaching, you're making an observation that the boys are not are not very upfront in the conversation. That as soon as the boys and the girls both come into the classroom, you are actually indicating that there is a reality that the girls might be more engaged in terms of doing their homework, in terms of engaging with the learning and being less susceptible to distraction. That's what you're saying. Of course, you're saying it from your you are your own observations. And the question is there any research that may support what you're talking about, especially in the context of Africa? And just try and bring this into perspective. I'm going to throw out some data, just like you have rightfully intimated to. Looking at some of the statistics can really begin telling us what's going on, and more importantly, perhaps tell us some of the things we need to start paying attention to. Remember, the thrust of this conversation is to try and tease out what are some of the things we may need to pay attention to in terms of the Africa's boy child, in terms of what's going on in our classrooms, in our schools. What are some of the interventions? So when we talk about the girl child, there are some interventions that are easily bandied around. We want to stop early marriages. We want to make sure more girls are enrolled in school. Okay, but what do we want to do for our boys? What are the things that are affecting our boys? We have said we want to enable 175 million girls and boys to learn. What will it take to enable boys and girls, boys to learn, even as we think about what it would take to enable girls to learn? So let me just share some data. I looked across the different parts of Africa. And of course, when you think about the girl child, the boy child, a lot of the time we talk about access. And that's why, for example, GP is talking about stopping early marriages so that these students can go back to school. And this for sure has been a big issue in many parts of Africa, getting girls to school, making sure girls are not married off at an early age. And it's something that is still going on. The question, though, is have we made, how much, there has been some gains made and some grounds made. And are there new challenges that are emerging for the girls and even for the boys? And I thought that perhaps to give us a feel of where things are at, either with access in terms of enrollment or with quality of learning that is going on, girls versus boys. And we're not saying this to try and compete one with the other, but just to get a sense of what's going on so that hopefully we can balance our interventions. And I looked across different parts of Africa, and I just picked out one country. So I went to West Africa, for example, and I looked at Nigeria, and I thought, look, the national exams at the end of O-level or primary school could give me a good, perhaps some picture of issues of enrollment and issues of quality of learning across the two genders. And I was looking at the Nigeria national exams at secondary level. I think in 2018, the number of boys who sat for the national exams in Nigeria in 2018 was very close. The boys were, the girls were around 55,500, and the boys were around 54,400. So in this case, there were slightly more girls than boys. And actually in 2020 also, I was looking at the exams that were just done under the COVID-19 pandemic, where they said there was a little bit of a reduction in the number of students who registered. They said 50.7% were girls and 49.26% were boys. So that is West Africa, Nigeria. And then I moved to South Africa, and I looked at Malawi. And in Malawi, I couldn't get the data that was able to have a look at was the data for the Malawi School Certificate of Education examination that came out towards the end of last year. And in this case, there were 10,000 less girls. In other words, 74,000 boys sat for the exams and around 64,000 girls sat for the exams. So there was a difference of 10,000 girls. And within staying with Southern Africa, I went down to South Africa and I looked at 2019 and 2020. 2019 results. I don't think I was able to get the breakdown for 2020. But for South Africa, in 2019, 61,744 more girls enrolled for the national examination. And even at the point of sitting for the examination, the more girls were able to sit for examination than the boys. In terms of performance, which is a different thing, we'll be talking about that, the girls' percentage rate was slightly less than the boys. The boys were at 82%. And the girls were at 80%. So that's Southern Africa. And staying with Southern Africa again, Zimbabwe 2019, again, they say girls and women seem to have outperformed boys, I think at the O and A level. So that is West Africa. Let's finish with East Africa. Just this week, Uganda released their national exams for 2020. And one of the comments that was made by the chair for the examination council was that only 92 more boys. Amongst those who enrolled for the national exams, there were only 92 more boys than girls. And then closer home to Uganda, Kenya released their results earlier in the year. And one of the statements that the Minister for Education said, who is your Minister Felix, said, we've almost reached gender parity. However, looking deeper into the data for Kenya, it was seen that there were counties where there were almost the number of girls who were enrolled for exams, around 5 counties, was 50% less than the number of boys. But then there were other countries where the number of girls who had enrolled for examination in Kenya was more than the number of boys. And finally, coming home to where I am today, Rwanda, I was just looking at, Rwanda is just finishing their national exams, and I was looking at the breakdown that was recently given. And across from primary, O level, and A level, there were more girls than boys who were sitting for the national examination. So, of course, this is issues of access. And this is just to try and paint a picture of where are we at. And I think at this point, I just want to say shout outs to all those people, all those institutions who've been working on issues related to the girl child, especially issues related to getting girls to school. What I have presented from across the different regions, of course, with some exceptions, is that yes, there has been gains. Girls are in school, perhaps in some cases more girls than boys. So noting that this is the case, going back to our GPE and looking at some of the outlined conversation points or goal points, I read an article that was saying, well, this conversation about raise your hand for education, but then there was an underlier that sounded like raise your hand for the girl child. Somebody said, well, that very specific focus on girls may be counterproductive. Felix, listening to the statistics that I've shared, which of course is not new to you, and of course listening to, like in this case, what we're saying we want to focus on, or rather, if you're advising Global Partnership for Education based on what they have outlined, what would be your reaction? And please, those of us who are listening, I would really want to hear and read your comments about the conversation points, the issues around girls and boys. Most of you who are listening are students, are teachers. What is it that is resonating with you? What is it that you want to point out? Felix, what would you say, listening to the statistics that I've just shared, of course, in addition to what you already had a look at, and in the context of the conversation that we're having today?
Thank you once again. One of the things that I find very unique, and it's like people have been talking, or communities discuss, there seems to be an agreement, and I think the assumptions. Let me start with the assumptions. The assumption has always been that we live in a man's world, and that has been a discussion for centuries. Recently, someone said we've just been working, we've just been looking at seeing women working at the workplace for around 70 years ago. And that, the last 70 years or so have really changed the dynamics of our society. And if you look at that statistic, or those statistics, it's like every time we are doing comparisons, I think along the way, we might have lost, a track of what exactly are we looking for? What are we trying to achieve? Right in the religious matters, I find sometimes working with children in religious circles to what is happening in society, to education and psychology. There has been an agitation that, and I, like you said, I keep saying that there is a specific need. Actually, there is an assumption that we really have focused so much over years on the man, on the boy, and ignored the woman. And let me pick something from the religious circle. You
Mm-hmm.
find we know, and even in our traditional African societies, in Muslim and Christian space, you find that the man was given some duty to do, in the face of the world. And I think this is where we got it wrong, and that's what we've been trying to correct. That men were
Mm-hmm.
given to dominate, the world, as you read from the religious circles. But they
Mm-hmm.
forgot they were not supposed to dominate, fellow men. They were not given opportunity to dominate, women or even children. They were given opportunity to dominate the earth, and it would be things to do with animals and other things. But then
Mm-hmm.
we messed up over time as a community. And then we realized this mid 1800s and 1900s and all that. And we started now building something. It is what is
Mm-hmm.
now what has brought us to this place. The conversation has always been we are equal, but we have never
Mm-hmm.
agreed that we are equal but different, because my dad wouldn't get an opportunity to be a mom. Well, dad, it can only be a dad. And so
Mm-hmm.
looking at that research now, it means that we have made a lot of progress when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
matters to do with uplifting the child who was dominated by
Mm-hmm.
a certain gender, and society kept perpetuating that discussion that
Mm-hmm.
boys, are even better. They are even better in certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But we never agreed. We never gave the women the place where we said women also are better in this other aspect. But because the focus should be on equal but different. And
Mm-hmm.
now, what we are
Mm-hmm.
seeing in classroom today and in our society, because I teach students whose families are messed up, and I'm sorry to say that. Of course, I can't point out to specific students, but where families are messed up, and the boys have been left on their own. I'm telling
Mm-hmm.
you, you find a boy coming from a specific family, um, sometimes does not bring out, the confidence that we thought over years has been there for men. And so when you expect a girl who, like my daughter, who has been raised, by maybe present parents or maybe something like that, the difference, it comes out even when they go to classroom, because a
Mm-hmm.
child who has both parents there, for example, a child who
Mm-hmm.
has, as present parents, will be different. A boy or a girl, they will be different in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom setup. And that is something people don't want to talk about, because over time we have empowered the girl,
Mm-hmm.
we have empowered the boy, but the place of the boy is like they are threatened. So when they go to
Mm-hmm.
classroom, they see, if it's the girl, let the girl go on. She thinks she knows. So and then they lose the opportunity. When it comes to even things to do with labor, and there is child labor around in Africa, where children are
Mm-hmm.
involved in with providing for the family, especially in the communities where where poverty has stricken a lot. You
Mm-hmm.
find a situation whereby the boy gets involved with providing for the family, and that affects their performance in classroom. They might be
Yeah.
okay, they might have
Yeah.
been given opportunities to do everything, they might be able
Mm-hmm.
to attend classes, but the pressure is still on them, and that is something we have not focused on. Then the
Yes.
discussion on
True.
now, should we go
Mm-hmm.
to chauvinism or feminism and all that? The focus
Mm-hmm.
should be, can we build a better society? Can we give children equal access to quality education? Because then
Perfect.
the
Yeah.
gender parity will be handled and so forth.
Perfect. I like the way you're saying the focus should be on the society. I mean, it's very interesting when you look at the Global Partnership for Education. I was just looking at the outline, the ripple effect of the 5 or 4 billion, and ultimately what they're saying is that they want a sustainable, peaceful, and resilient society. But what you are actually saying is that for us to achieve that, we have to be able to look and tease out the issues that are affecting not just the girl child, as is seemingly articulated more clearly in their outline, but also the boy child. And what I'm hearing from you, which is really true, when you go back to ecological frameworks for education that actually promote looking at education as happening within an ecosystem. So that even though you want to have quality teaching and learning, you appreciating that there are macro systems, there are both macro systems and meso systems within which the school is actually embedded in. And so as much as we're looking at getting the kids to school, we have to ask ourselves what's going on in the society. And so things like, and I'm saying things like, parenting systems within the society. How is it affecting the girl child vis-a-vis the boy child in this era? Just to echo what you've said, a teacher from Kenya sent me a text earlier on, and he says, was talking about the boy child, and he was talking, he articulated and said, the second issue about the boy child is the parenthood that has been, is the issue of single parenthood that is on the rise in Africa in the recent past. And he continued to say, unlike the girls, boys require more guidance in terms of role modeling. Girls would adapt very quickly to a situation and move on with the hope of, according to him, one day finding their life. But he says the boy child, on the other hand, is looking at all angles with lack of proper guidance and fatherhood in our society. And I've brought this up because he's not the only person who brought out that issue of family systems and how that is affecting the African boy child, and how that then is creating a ripple effect back in our classrooms. And I want to share. I'm going to play an audio. Perhaps next from a teacher from Malawi. But before I do that, I think it is proper for us to go on some advertisement break. So we are going to take a short advertisement break and just play our first advertisement. And then I will come back to this conversation of the ecosystem, having an ecological lens and noting that if indeed what we're going after is sustainable, peaceful, and resilient society, as been articulated by the Global Partnership for Education, then we need to tease out perhaps a little better how this 4 billion can be focused on matters that is affecting both the girls and the boys in a more explicit way. But we'll come back to that conversation. And thank you very much for those of you who are still here. Slow Life, I can see you're saying hello. I know you tried to call in. Please confirm to me that you have your mic on, because without the mic there will be echoes and we'll just have bad feedback into the conversation. But if you don't have your mic, please feel free to type in your comments. And please, all the other teachers, let's hear what you're seeing, what you're hearing, the observations that Felix is bringing up about the boy child versus the girl child in the classroom when both girls and boys finally get into our classroom. Are you observing some differences? And I'll talk a little bit about that because it relates to some of the research I did for my PhD paper. But for now, let's have an advertisement break.
Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts, or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsia puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website, www.cre8tiveresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TT Radio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting...
Yes. So back to our conversation. So as you're saying, Felix, the issue here is society. We want to build a society that both the girls and the boys can live in, and we need to look very carefully in terms of our interventions, even those that are linked to school, for us to take into account the fact that there are out of school factors that affect the boys and the girls. And sometimes the challenge is that sometimes There are factors that affect both girls and boys because they are coming from the same setup. But then we perhaps step out to address it for the boys more than for the girls. I mean, for the girls more than for the boys. And those are the things we need to ask ourselves. What, therefore, would be the ramifications of such potentially not very balanced interventions? And just to try and put this into perspective, I'm going to play an audio. It's a little long, but perhaps it's worth listening to. It's from a teacher from Malawi, actually a member of the teacher union in Malawi, who would have really loved to be part of this conversation, but got to know about it late. And so he sent an audio just a few minutes before we started the session. That was part of the reason why we delayed, because we had to convert it into an MP3. I wanted a shorter audio, but he sent a long audio. But I think he brings out some very pertinent issues that is worth listening to. And then we'll come back to what is that you're observing about girls and boys in class? What are those differences? And start teasing out specific interventions that we think governments and institutions potentially could start thinking about when you're thinking about the boy child. But let's listen to this teacher from Malawi.
I am Pililand Kamaliza. I am the National Programs Coordinator for Teachers Union of Malawi. Regarding to whether boys' education in Malawi are given enough attention, the answer is no. All along, the focus in terms of promoting education in Malawi has been biased towards promoting girls' education, basically considering the vulnerability girls have in terms of completing their education. But because the focus has been much focused on boys, on girls' education, that has also made boys to counter attack initiatives placed on the ground to promote girls' education, because they somehow feel like they are being sidelined in the process. Because mostly, some of the challenges affecting girls' education in Malawi similarly also affect boys' education. For example, especially in secondary schools, issues of long distance to school, issues of school fees, for example, issues of child marriages, and etc., etc., have also affected boys the say as well as the girls' education. So, in regarding to the challenges boys are experiencing in our schools, so these are some of the examples of challenges boys are experiencing in our schools. For example, long distance to school. As far as this is a challenge to girls, this is also a very big challenge to the boys, because boys similarly are able to travel long distance to access education, especially in secondary schools. Apart from that, issues of school fees. You find that although much of the attention has been given to girls' education, for example, access to bursaries have prioritized much on girls, but boys are equally affected. We have a significant number of boys who have dropped out of secondary school simply because they don't have school fees. In addition to that, issues of, for example, peer pressure amongst boys is quite rampant, unlike amongst girls. So you talk of issues of drug and substance abuse, issues of sexual relationships amongst youth is much rampant amongst boys. So these are some of the um, problems also affecting boys' education. One unique thing, though much of the interventions in Malawi have been like to promote those girls who dropped out of school because of pregnancy. It is also a problem with the boys, because most of the times, most of these school going girls who are getting pregnant are impregnated by the boys, and at the end, much pressure in terms of looking after the child is exerted on these boys. So we have examples whereby boys are at the same time attending school while they are also heading child marriages, and because of that, you find that they are also having a lot of difficulties in terms of excelling in their education, because apart from apart from attending school, after that they need to look after their wives, they need to look after their children, So that also places a lot of pressure on our boys. In terms of
Yes, sorry. So it's a fairly long one, but some parallels that you're listening to there, Felix. That's a teacher from Malawi, actually a member of the teacher union in Malawi. And he seems, I mean, he's talking about the similarity, some parallels around the difficulties the boys and the girls are facing, especially those in the rural area, issues related to long distance child marriage. What would you take there for them? And before you respond, I just want to read a tweet that I picked out during the GPE conference. And I mean, this is a random one, but perhaps it gives a picture in terms of what part of what we're talking about and what he's saying. And this was a tweet by a lady called Helen Grant. I imagine she's related to, she's an MP and she's related to, I mean, she something to do with UK aid. But this is what she tweeted. She said, "Fantastic speaking with Her Excellency Monica Chakwera, First Lady of Malawi, and the Minister of Education, Minister Agnes Makonda Ridley today. Two strong advocates for girls' education. We discussed the challenges girls in Malawi face. And then hashtag UK Aid is supporting girls to stay in school." So just listening to that teacher and perhaps putting it alongside this tweet, these are two powerful ladies from Malawi, the first lady herself, the minister for education. And of course, I imagine they had other conversation, but from what this tweet is alluding to, uh, there was quite some conversation about the girls' education, which is good, which is good. But what, how would you, I mean, how would you treat with this tweet alongside what this teacher has just articulated about the Malawi situation? Felix.
Wow. The teacher from Malawi is, wow, is really into the issues affecting um, the boys and girls, and he's really in the. Some people, sometimes we talk from high offices. Previously, I used to work as an auditor before I became a teacher, and
Mm-hmm,
I could say many things. I could give opinions, but
mm-hmm,
like I said, a teacher is the street bureaucrat when it comes to the happenings in the classroom. And
mm-hmm,
what I hear from the man is that actually there is a big need. There is a huge, huge need. And even from the research that you put out there, you know,
mm-hmm,
you can tell there is something that is happening that needs to be addressed. And from the GP, conference now, with the ladies saying that, I think the ladies, including Helena Grant, I think they are right. They are very much right when it comes to what is happening to the girls.
mm-hmm,
If you focusing on solving a problem, you
mm-hmm,
of course will find a solution. But when you're
mm-hmm,
focusing on one problem, and that problem, there is what we call the causal. Even when you're doing research, the causal effect. What is really bringing all this, so that you can see the results. So when you look at what is happening, and I'll give you an example based on the conference and also on that situation that we are talking about in
mm-hmm,
Malawi, you find that we are focusing on addressing a problem, but you're not going to
mm-hmm,
the root cause of all this.
mm-hmm,
You've talked about access. We talk about child labor in the matters
mm-hmm,
around education and why children are in school and they are not. The
mm-hmm,
SDG 4, which is quality education. The focus, when they say there is 157 million children, rather 57 million children, sorry, 57 million children that are out of school, they don't
mm-hmm,
specifically point at girls. One of the
mm-hmm,
other facts and figures about that, they say 6 out of 10 adolescents cannot communicate well in terms of literacy and numeracy. When they
mm-hmm,
talk about also something to do with 4 out of 10 girls are out of school, that is trying to be inclusive in everything. It's trying to
mm-hmm,
be able to bring out everything, so that we can address the concerns around the boys and girls. And
mm-hmm,
I want to mention something. A few years ago, at university, we used to have an office called the Gender Secretary, Gender
mm-hmm,
and Social Welfare. And
mm-hmm,
all the years, throughout my academic years, when I was doing my course in university, the discussion was that was a preserve for the women. So I
mm-hmm,
challenged the status quo and I said, guys, we have to think differently. Where we are going from here is not to go to a better university and better high school, the way we used to look forward for a better school when you are in primary, then secondary, then better university and so forth. We're going to start families. And I felt an urge from in my heart and in my community, because especially because of my experience in my family, that we need to do something about what is coming out. The focus, we should actually challenge the status quo such that we do not just say this is an issue to do with women. Whenever we talk about gender, it's not about women. Whenever we talk about it, it's not about women. There is a societal concern that needs to be addressed. And for me, my manifesto was simple. I said, I'm going to vie for gender secretary, because I feel the problem is in the boys and in the girls. There is a thinking that women, women have challenges, because we know that. It's very clear. We know, and we know what exactly our moms and our sisters go through. But there is a discussion here where men, however legislative agenda we put in place, like in Kenya, we say we're going to double the number of women who come to parliament. It's not about the law. There is a need that needs to be addressed, because even when we say all that, they still say, oh, a woman can't be our president. You can't say that. You cannot say that, because they are equal. It's only that they are different. So there is a deep-seated concern that we need to address. And so that teacher from Malawi is actually saying what I was saying 8 years ago, yes, in 2012. And I was saying that we need to look at positive masculinities, positive femininities, so that the boys know the place of the girls and the girls know the place of the men, and they complement one another. Because if we don't do that, we're going to keep empowering the girl. The man will be threatened. We know from statistics that men are expected to be the ones that are facing the challenges and doing stuff. But then over time, because the women who understand what is they given the same environment are able to even do better, and I have no idea why. By the way, I don't think there is a research which can point out to that. I just know that there is when boys and girls are given the same chances, girls seem to do well, especially in the area of education. And even at workplace, I see that every day. Women seem to do well. I don't know, it's because of threat or something. But what are the causal effect? The teacher was saying, if your girls are pregnant in classroom, chances that it's not even about the teachers. It is the fellow boys. So we need to address the matter of sexuality around adolescence, so that it affects within the boys and the girls, and see how we come together. When we're talking about access, we need to look at access to information, access to education. What is causing the access, in access to what is happening? Is it poverty? Is it child labor? Those concerns, because if we say girls are going to get opportunities because of the challenge that they have, where do we leave the boy who is affected by that? And it could be one boy against 4 girls. What will we do to this one boy? Because if we don't do something about this one boy, he will get married one day to these girls. And based on the community and society where they are, this girl, it will be like a threat. I used to have a friend who used to say, I cannot marry a woman who is earning more than me. And then I asked him one day, what if the lady also goes to school and is able to get a good job and they are paid more than you? What will you do that? So that is our concern even among the boys. How do we help the boys to see you do not need to be threatened by the woman? You don't need to be worried when you give an opportunity to our girl. You're actually building yourself, because whatever the girl will do will be to support you, even from the religious circle. So the teacher from Malawi is very, very clear about that. The boys needs to be, helped.
So I hear you, and I hear you saying we need to challenge the status quo. And part of the status quo is just that misinterpretation of issues related to gender, that when we hear the word gender, we just think girls. But actually, gender is about both. It's about roles, really, the girls and boys, and so the balance outlook. I mean, I think, if I'm not wrong, during the run up to this conference, so some countries talk about, we have a policy for girls, education policy for girls, on how to support girls, which is good. And I mean, as I said, I'm one of the champions of girls. I am a mother of 3 daughters. I am a of course, a lady in education. I work a lot around issues related to getting the girl child, especially to connect with the sciences alongside the boy. So that's really perfect. But I think what we're hearing more is that while, yes, perhaps we started from, let's say, the negative line of this whole mechanism where the girls were really out of school, they were being married off early, they were not going to school anymore. What the data is showing us, a little bit from what I already indicated from West Africa, South Africa, East Africa, is that indeed we have borne fruit in getting our girls in expanding that pipeline, and we should continue doing that. However, I believe what you're saying and what the Malawian teacher is pointing out to is that the ultimate goal of a sustainable, peaceful, and resilient society, which is the goal outlined by the Global Partnership for Education, will not be achieved if we leave the boys behind. And as it is now, there is a sense that the boys are beginning to be left behind. There are issues that concern them that they feel are not being addressed, and we must be careful not to be too caught up in that, because then again we'll have to go back to try and get the boy child from behind. So we'll always be trying to correct issues. So just waking up to ensure we implement complementary interventions. And already you are pointing out to some of those interventions, issues of access, anything about access. How do we implement interventions that are supposed to increase access in a way that it is both supportive for the boys and the girls? As the teacher said, if it's a rural child, if it's long distances, both the boys and the girls are walking the long distances. If it's issues of fee, how do we ensure that the bursaries are fairly more balanced so that both boys and girls have equal access? And of course, also changing our attitude, issues of positive masculinity. I think I just want to read a statement here from a teacher from Rwanda who said, nowadays the boy child of Africa is in a dangerous situation where we have considered them as energetic and hardworking people in society. And this kind of behavior creates a big gap in terms of performance. Because the child, we don't then give as much care, nurturing care or attention. And you already pointed to this yourself in terms of even the situation with the family status and how this really presents a challenge. I will come back to that actually, but just so that we tick off some of this, I'm going to play our second advertisement, and then we'll come back and I will read out something from Kenya nomadic community, what they said about the boys and research that they did during this COVID-19 pandemic and what they found out about girls versus boys. Let's listen to this.
Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful, and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club. Every teacher loves stationery.
Great. So teachers love stationery. So in this case, yes, I wanted to read a statement, just a little bit. This was sent by an educationist who works in the nomadic community of Kenya. And going back to what I said about Kenya achieving gender parity, I said there were some counties that the girls are really out of school, and then there are some counties where the boys are the small boys are out of school. But this was really interesting because actually this wasn't from the nomadic community. Yeah, it was from the nomadic community. Let me just read what this educationist said. This is what the person wrote. Our recent research in Isiolo, which is one of the northeastern districts or counties, on return to school after COVID-19 showed that 5% of girls did not return, and 18% of boys. On the other hand, 18% of boys didn't return. So 5 versus 18 in favor of the girls. Teenage pregnancy and early marriages was not the leading determinant of non-return as we had assumed. Instead, work that followed family hearts was more important. And then he goes ahead to say that more research should also be done in some areas where there are some cash crops grown. In this case, he's talking about the Mira situation. So you see in this area, more boys did not come back to school after the COVID-19 long school break. And looking at, because there's been a lot of conversation about teenage pregnancies, but in this particular community, the bigger issue was not teenage pregnancy. The bigger issue was boys being engaged, in this case, in herding their cattle, and therefore they were supporting the family in that they were not able to come back. And you already alluded also to, boys being caught up in income generating activities. So these things, I mean, as the reason why we are highlighting this, of course, part of the thrust of this conversation was, what are some of the things we might need to pay attention to in terms of interventions? And what's coming out quite consistently outside access, outside looking at similar challenges that is affecting both boys and girls in specific communities and trying to engage with that, is that the issue of child labor, that there are specific African communities where the boy child is technically not coming back to school more and more because of increased opportunities to engage in economic activities. And I remember even as school was opening, I was in Kenya and I was talking to my mother. I've always said that my mother is a long-term teacher. She's taught for over 2 or 3 decades now. She's a retiree. And I remember her commenting and saying, the fact that so many of the school-going boys had started business riding the motorbikes. So with the new opportunity, this new opportunity for motorbike transportation in different countries in Africa, that is an additional avenue for a tractor call to get students out of school. And as has been pointed out in this particular community, as soon as they got into it, it is always difficult to bring them back to class, to have them paying attention in class, perhaps when they're thinking about, how much money they could be making by the minute if they were not in school. So there are actually real issues outside there that have already begun coming out, especially that aspect of labor, that we really, institutions that are talking about improving access for boys in this case must also think about. Because again, these things are interconnected. Sometimes it is these boys who, have some little money, but, they're not that well developed or whatever. Again, if you go back, you might come full cycle and find that the issues of pregnancies can easily be traced back within that cycle of, these boys who have money and this girl who, of course, is vulnerable, and all those, they're lacking proper sexual education and support. Then again, we have the issues of early child marriage, and as a Malawian teacher, early marriages, which is affecting both boys and girls. So, Felix, we're almost going towards the end. I don't know whether there's an additional point. I'll come back and try and respond to your question about what's going on with the boys and the girls as soon as they get to the classroom. I did a little bit of a research around that, and perhaps I have some thoughts around that. I will plug into that conversation, but I don't know what your thoughts are as you listen to this teacher. This researcher from education is from Isiolo, and as we think more about issues related to labor and the distractor points like drugs for the boy child, and then now we begin teasing out, if you were to advise the Kenyan government, if Professor Magoha came home and said, well, out of the GPE, we've pocketed some $0.2 billion, and we want to work on it. We want to use it to enable learning for both girls and boys. what would be your take? What would be your advisory? What is it that you'd really want to see happening in your country?
Thank you very much. You know, I think the teacher from Isiolo, I mean, that person was done that research on 5% and 18%. They are really speaking. You know, let me tell you what I think is happening. I am in a community initiative, the STEAM Labs community, STEAM Labs
Mm-hmm.
Africa community. The focus is to, but in teaching, there is something called the Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Mm-hmm.
say, in recent days, it has been a very important thing. We say,
Mm-hmm.
and there is also the Bloom's taxonomy, the Bloom's taxonomy, you
Mm-hmm.
know, where creativity is at the top.
Mm-hmm.
We say Maslow comes first.
Mm-hmm.
My security comes first. My
Mm-hmm.
security comes first. I am saying that intentionally. My security comes first before I can be creative. At STEAM Labs, whenever I call for initiatives for children to participate, we recently ran a STEAM competition in Kenya for
Mm-hmm.
children from Homa Bay to Mombasa, from Kajiado to Marsabit, north and south
Mm-hmm.
and south and I mean north, south, east, and west. And what you realize is this: what you just said is so powerful. In
Mm-hmm.
my village where I come from Kitui. Girls who are in high school drop out of school to be carried by motorbikes because they are doing day schooling. So they leave school, they go to the
Mm-hmm.
motorbike person, the boy who is carrying them, and by the time they get home, they are married. The
Mm-hmm.
boy dropped in Form 2, the girl is in Form 4. The girl is not able to
Mm-hmm.
finish her studies because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the boy doing that? Because in the African context, and it's important to
Mm-hmm.
mention this, the man is still the provider. Of course, we know
Mm-hmm.
the certain things where women are coming in and they're actually taking charge of families.
Mm-hmm.
We know the backbone of the family in the African context is the man. That aspect of growing, knowing that you are going to be, you have to make money. Actually, they say we have to make it. We have to make it. We have to make it.
Mm-hmm.
Pushes the boys so much such that when they're in class and the mom did not get enough money, of course, because moms are also standing in for the families at home, especially with our dads who have really not done very well in the last decades. You know, you find the boys are now taking charge to help mom. And as they do that, they drop and they drop. They find the girls who are in school and pull them out of the class. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so the boy to provide for the family, to do work, to leave school for the brothers and the siblings who are younger to go to school is very easy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the girl
Mm-hmm.
also has that opportunity because most of the times girls go for this thing we call the house girls. They
Mm-hmm.
choose to go and look for jobs to support if they are the first born or second born. But
Mm-hmm.
the chances are that the boys, if they happen to be the firstborn, they will drop out of school to go and vent for their brothers and sisters who are younger to support mom when a dad is away, because sometimes dad keeps away. You know, that
Mm-hmm.
family dynamic. Now,
Mm-hmm.
with boys thinking about work, with now in nomadic communities, boys being the one who are courageous to go and face the lions, of course, if they are lions in the community,
Mm-hmm.
to take care of the animals. With the boys
Mm-hmm.
in my community in Kitui, thinking about, you know, my sisters have suffered, I can miss school, I will make it, I'm a man, I can do it, I'm strong. They choose to drop so that they can support their family. And that
Mm-hmm.
is what is bringing us to where we are. 5%, 18%. The
Mm-hmm.
focus also on education for the women also plays a big role because with girl, and this other thing where the girl is thought to be the one who is going to be more responsible, who is going to remember the parents. So the parents even prefer to take the girl into school, and the boy can, you know, work so hard and make it to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to make a livelihood out of themselves. My special mention, my special advice to my government is simply, when you're looking at education and the UN agenda for 2030 is specific, quality education
Mm-hmm.
is that we provide quality education to all children. If it
Mm-hmm.
is not possible, do not say, I'm going to take out of 1 to 4 children, and I keep going to that statistic because I think it's the one that was placed. If
Mm-hmm.
1 is to 4, for the girls who are missing education because of concerns around sexuality, things to do with, the needs in the community, let's see to it. It's better even to spend that 0.3 billion from the GPE. It's better even to spend that on 10 children rather than spend 100 spend on 100 children who are all girls and forget these 10 boys who are out there. If you do not do that, this will catch up with you very soon, because you'll have a very messed up community. So let's embrace every child. And you know what? Children do not even know about their boys or girls. They just want to be in school. So if we can invest, we have to invest very wisely, so that we do not leave a boy thinking now the boy will be able to work hard. They will not work hard. In fact, they can even get into crime. And the chances that the boys are going to get into crime more than the girls.
True. So the balance, the issue of balance, the issue of being more explicit, because I think also how we talk. I mean, if the boy child, I think that's one of the things that that the Malawian teacher talked about, how we can be a little more loud about the fact that we care for our boy child. I mean, because again, in our conversation, so for example, this GPE, I mean, it's raising money for both boys and girls. But if you were to do a content analysis of the conversations, then perhaps you'd find that the word girls perhaps was mentioned more than the word boy. And you see, nowadays we are on an information age. The children are listening to this. When we're talking about raise your hand, I mean, we are raising our hand for education. That was the campaign. However, it starts with a girl raised their hand for education. I mean, Kenya says it's going to co-host this. Very good. But then there seems to be we're a little more loud on the girls than the boys. So how we can make the boy feel as present as in the picture as the girl. So it's not boys versus girls. It's just the things that we've done. I mean, we must agree that yes, we started on the negative, on the girl child part, but we have gained some ground, and now we have to be careful to pull up the boys so that we do not find ourselves in a cycle where the boy who has dropped out of the school is the one hunting down the girls who you are trying to put in school, and it just becomes a cycle. So I'll come back to I want to comment a little bit on the issues of quality, because that's also the other thing, whether a little bit of this conversation should now start tipping a little bit more towards quality. I know that was even the push between the differentiation between the Millennium Development Goals and the SDGs, where before it was access, but then we realized quantity without quality actually perhaps is more problematic. So the issues of quality and what that means in terms of the differentiation around how boys and girls might actually deal with learning. And that's, I mean, normally we talk about gender responsive pedagogy. But before we do that, we have some news to listen to. So I'm going to play the news for today. Let me just look it up. But yeah, but we need to, it's important that we start thinking about quality. We need to ask ourselves, how is it, as per your observation, which is really true, that when the boys, both boys and girls, come to class, the girls perhaps are more forthcoming. They're the ones raising their hand up. And somebody told me they create an environment where the boys actually feel perhaps a little uncomfortable because boys are not as chatty. So we'll come back to that. But let's just listen to some news for the week.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Tom Hopkins Burke.
This is your weekend Teachers Talk Radio News with Tom Hopkins Burke. The government's analysis of cuts to pupil premium funding has understated how much schools will lose by £43 million. Analysis from the Education Data Lab suggests that 104,000 children receiving free school meals will not attract extra funding. The Department for Education claimed that just 62,000 pupils would miss out. The average school will stand to lose £6,142, according to the new research based on the DFE's own data. A record number of school leavers will receive their first choice of university this summer, according to the National Admission Service's UCAS. UCAS Chief Executive Claire Marchant says there is unlikely to be a tsunami of appeals over teacher-assessed grades because 80% plus of students will get their first place. More than 310,000 18-year-olds had applied for higher education places by the end of June, an increase of 10% on 2020. Marchant also warned that application rates from students from disadvantaged backgrounds were rising more slowly than those from more affluent backgrounds. Former Conservative Education Secretary Kenneth Baker has criticised the government's decision to scrap BTECs in favour of T levels. Baker described the overhaul as an act of educational vandalism, claiming that BTECs are a particular help to disadvantaged young people. In response, the DFE said that the changes to Level 3 qualifications would simplify and streamline the current system. An Ofsted Outstanding School in Gloucestershire has been teaching students in staff rooms in order to maintain social distancing. Dean Magna's School has used staff rooms and staff training rooms as makeshift classrooms and has temporarily moved teachers to the school library. The school has applied to set up 2 modular classroom buildings on site to allow the school to function adequately in the short term. That was Tom Hopkins-Burke with your weekend Teachers Talk Radio news.
Great.
This is
So as we move to the last 10 minutes of our conversation, the issue about quality, and of course, perhaps this is something that we can have a conversation on again. But again, just looking through the data from our schools and looking from the regions, perhaps, and looking at the goals that have been put here, let's say by an institution such as the Global Partnership for Education. Of course, this is just an organization. Our governments have to think through their own policies and their own what it is that they want to focus on. But I think what you're saying, which is really important, and which, of course, as I said, is articulated in the international goals, moving from one of the things that was pointed out as a difference between the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals when we're talking about education, was that it's not just about quantity, it's not just about the numbers, it's about what's the quality of learning that is taking place. And even as we think about the quality of learning that is taking place, that also has to be looked through with a gender lens. And I think what drawing back from what you said, what we must be cautious about when we think about gender, even in terms of quality. I was reflecting on it as a person who trains teachers, and I was like, sometimes we are very keen to amplify what is it that the teachers need to do to enable the girl child to learn better in the classroom, which is important. So, for example, create a classroom that is less competitive, because research has shown that girls work better in a more collaborative way, which is good. But I was just challenging myself as I reflected on that, and I was saying, how many times do you pick out to amplify or to explicitly talk about specific things that the teachers need to do to support the boy child better in their actual learning of the specific subjects? And even when you stop the boy child from perhaps projecting negative masculinity in the classroom, to create a more nurturing environment for the girls, what is the balance for the boy child on what else they should be doing? Because I think you may have seen in a platform, because we're together with you on the same platform, where one of the persons said the boys are dazzled, they are rudderless, because there are things they're being told to stop doing, but perhaps we are not telling them what's the alternative, what is the more positive way of projecting themselves. If they get into this class where perhaps there's so much conversation, a teacher said, we create an environment where there's so much quote unquote chattering, and maybe the boy child from an African context is more reserved. How then do we create that environment that is more supportive to the boy, but that creates a positive environment for both the boys and the girls? So I think that very thin balance is something that we need to dig out again. And of course, all these are contextually based. It plays out in different contexts. There's culture that goes with it, and the cultural capital that the students carry with them, both boys and girls. Some girls are actually trained to be more assertive. I as a mother, I would train my daughters to be able to speak out and to stand out in their space and all that. And so yeah, so do you think we have learned enough and we are doing enough to help reorient the boy child to be more present in a more positive way? Or are we cutting off certain things but then leaving them hanging without tutoring or guidance on perhaps what you'd consider as positive masculinity that would be helpful to them also? So
Thank you. I think one thing that you're mentioning, and I hope you can hear me clearly.
yes.
At one point, I think you're breaking, but I think it's clear. Can you hear me, Rin?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed, I'm a teacher of mathematics and
Hello, Felix. You dropped down there. Felix? Hello?
even when I call my students to come
Felix?
to class, yes,
Okay, you're back.
yeah. Every time I bring my students to the classroom around technology, there is still this buzz, around boys are from Xbox and girls are from IG, which is Instagram, and that is for the school that I sometimes go and teach. I have teach at various schools. In that school, what I realized is that when we are talking about tech, the girls are really, laid back. They don't want even to participate. In fact, to counter that as a teacher, and I will say that in a few seconds, as a teacher, I've realized my girls are behind when it comes to tech, especially after 12 years of age. I have come up with this an agreement, and I met someone from World Largest Lesson from the UK recently called Stephanie Marston, and we were talking and we realized if we don't catch the attention of the girls when it comes to tech and technology in education and even everything to do with the STEAM or STEM fields, chances are that we might not capture that girl after that, because I think there is the dynamics around growing for the girls and how the interests are placed. So we have to do something as early as possible. That is something about the girls. But let's look at the boys. The boys are so much, into it. But let me tell you what is happening. When you give the students the opportunity to do the project, whether it is about gender equality, something to do with mental health around global good health and well-being as one of the SDGs, but that is what I do. When I'm giving them a project to work on climate action, in as much as the boys who are so excited about tech, it is the girls who give me quality projects. And that tells me, for me to be able to continue teaching, I must have my children in mind, that they might not show interest at the beginning. It doesn't mean that they don't like it. It's just that they have not been given time to understand it, and I need to deal with the attitude over time. Because when I come back to ask for projects, the boys give me not very good projects. Of course, you cannot say all the boys. I'm just saying on average. And I'll tell you why. Because boys are into gaming. They are always looking for opportunities to conquer in my environment. That's what I found. That they look at technology as a place to come and play, not to engage. And girls have taken that opportunity and they have plugged in. In the end, we have boys who have not really encouraged themselves, even if the attitudes are good. No, the boys have not really encouraged themselves to internalize content and use technology for good. But girls are able to connect. And that is where we have. And now in UK and various other communities, because I read a lot on online safety, more boys are into video games. Not because there is anything fun in that. Not really fun, but in terms of engagement of content, but more of having fun. And so when I lose them in mathematics, because I also teach mathematics, they are working on their own cohort of gaming platforms where they meet and they do things. So instead of focusing on studies, they are stuck with technology. So technology becomes another concern in this discussion. And the boys will be found using technology for fun, while the other people, the girls, will actually be able to plug in because they only want to see what really makes sense in the whole picture. So then we lose boys, you know, into gaming. And now you hear betting and other things that are out there. Girls have been also, you know, in the process. So boys, what shall we do? Parents ask me, what can I do as a digital citizen to support my child to use technology not as a consumer but as creator? And I say the parents ask me that constant question: is the parents or the boys, not the girls.
Interesting. I can see our time is up, but yes, I mean, there's more conversation around this. There's more conversation about quality. I think we need to pivot this conversation as a continent to go into the issues of quality, the issues of specific approaches, achievement goals, because what research shows, actually very connected to what you're saying, is that girls tend to be more connected to social goals in learning. In other words, I'm learning this to solve a problem in the society. As soon as you present your lessons or your content right from the beginning with that, you're likely to draw more attention of the girls than the boys, who part of the research says they're more about performance. I want to be seen to be good, or I want to be a master. And as now you're saying, the issues of there's something we're talking about, this delay of gratification. You know, I want to have fun and immediacy around that. So there's a lot to have this conversation about, and actually to note that it is not just it's not just access where the reversal is beginning to happen. And there is nothing wrong with the girls being at the top. I think I want to also say that. I think somebody pointed out to me, the Minister for Education for Kenya, who said, thank goodness it's a boy, when he was announcing the best student during the national exam. And of course, that really was off, because I think we have to find a way of balancing this conversation so that it's not boys versus girls. It's just, is everybody bringing out their best potential? There are days that the girls will be at the top of the tables, and we should celebrate them for that, not because they beat the boys, but because they did well. And there are days that the boys will be at the top of the table and should be okay. We should celebrate them for that, not because they beat the girls, but because they did well. And everybody is being encouraged to bring out their best. But as people who are policymakers, who are doing interventions like yourself in technology, those who are thinking about, interventions to do at global scale level, like the Global Partnership for Education, it is time that we dug in a little deep. I think the core focus of this conversation is that, yes, both boys and girls need to be enabled to learn, as has been articulated. We need to put more attention in digging out specific interventions that would actually support the boy child in Africa. And it's not just an African issue. I mean, as I said, it's not a competition issue, but I was looking at data that showed there's a great reversal in terms of performance, in terms of enrollment in other parts of the world too, where the girls are actually toppling the tables, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if we're doing that at the expense of the boys, and the boys get lost in drugs, get lost in cheap labor, and later feel like they're not fulfilled, and therefore find themselves caught up in betting and all this, then of course we will not have a sustainable, peaceful, and resilient society, which is what we are all aiming at the end of the day. And there's something you talked about, Maslow laws before Bloom taxonomy. That's something worth having a conversation on for both boys and girls. And it's such a closely knitted web. We try to separate them and look at them so differently in our society. The truth is, they're brothers and sisters from the same households. They're in the same communities. The vices and the virtues that they are exposed to, they can entangle each other. So, as you said, let's talk to our governments. Let's talk to those of us in education. Let's work together to be more deliberate around pulling up the boy alongside the girls. Let's continue the good work we're doing with the girls, but let's make sure our brothers, our sons, are not left behind, because otherwise everything we do might just come to a zero at some point. So yeah, it's been a great conversation. I want to celebrate everybody who has come. Shout out to everybody. Thank you for coming. Let's talk again next Sunday at the same time. Thank you, Felix. Shout out to you
I
for
am Piniland Kamaliza.
coming along. I'm trying to look for my closing jingle, but otherwise, thank you very much for everybody who's been on. I've been told some people had trouble with typing in on the chat. They could not type in their full chats. I'm going to look into that so that next time we have a better interaction. But again, we have an opportunity to listen back to this. I think this is something worth circulating to other people. And look out for other TT radio shows. Very informative, very educative, especially those of us teachers who are still on holiday. Over and out, this is your Dr. Herine Otieno-Menya, Africa's own education doctor and education evangelist. Whenever I'm on air, whenever it is a Sunday show, then we know we are talking about Africa Education Matters. And please look out, I'll be launching my podcast later this week that will also be talking about some of these pertinent issues around Africa Education Matters. Felix, thank you very much for coming, and let's continue working for a better Africa, for more sustainable, peaceful, and resilient societies by taking care of both the girls and the boys. Thank you very much, and see you guys, everybody, again next Sunday.
Thank you. With pleasure. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.